my name's Alex Most, and thank you for watching this video on my new board game, The Swamp. In The Swamp, players are political parties trying to pass laws on issues that their party cares about. Every party has unique issues that they need to pass laws on, but these issues are overlapping with one another. So, Change the Change will win the game if it passes 3 laws on justice and education, and the Anti-Confederalists will win the game if they pass 3 laws on justice and healthcare. This is the Congress board that tracks each individual issue and if its 3 laws have been passed. And the game takes place in 2 different phases, the election and the legislative session. In the election, players buy politicians and buy politics cards that they then, in the legislative session, use to manipulate votes and try to pass laws on their issues. At the beginning of the game, each player is given 2 politician cards. Politicians have issues they approve of and issues that they disapprove of, which can be manipulated by the politics cards throughout the game. In the election, at the beginning of the game, it starts with the speaker. The speaker is able to buy independent politicians. These neutral politicians, 12 of which start on the board at the beginning of the game. The speaker can also pay to steal politicians from other players, and they can buy politics cards, which are powerful cards that can change votes. There are 4 kinds of politics cards. There's legislation that can be played in the legislative session. There are amendments that are played before votes, and reactions that are played after votes. Finally, there's the Media Leak card, which is a special counter card that can prevent another player's politics card. Each player takes a turn during the election, buying as much or as little as they want, and once every player has gone, the election ends and the legislative session begins. At the start of the legislative session, the speaker holds the floor. The floor is a rule of decorum that means only one player may play a piece of legislation at that time. When the speaker holds the floor, they can choose to play one piece of legislation or yield the floor. The floor is held. A player can only play one piece of legislation. When they've played this, they say, "I yield the floor," opening the floor for other players. Those players may then say, "I take the floor," the speaker deciding in any ties if players were to speak at the same time. When they hold the floor, they can play a piece of legislation. A common piece of legislation is the bill card, which every player starts with and gets refreshed at the start of every legislative session. This allows players to call a vote on any issue to try to pass a law. Once it's used, it's flipped to its proposed side. Other examples of legislation is the public support card, which allows players to get money for each one of their politicians who approve of the public mood, or the platform proposal, which allows players to call an additional vote in addition to their bill on any given issue. Once every player has spent their bill, the legislative session ends and another election begins. But how does the vote actually work for each individual issue? When a bill or another politics card is played that calls for a vote, the vote immediately begins, and the vote takes place in 5 steps. First, there are the amendments, then there's the ballot, then the reactions, then the tallying of votes, and finally, the public mood. At the beginning, amendments may be played. Amendments generally manipulate the vote to come. For example, the legislative maneuver card allows a player to choose another party. That party will not vote in this ballot. Once all the amendment cards are played, there is the ballot, where players choose how they will vote, with all of their politicians voting according to how the party votes. So each player chooses which way they will vote, they put it face down, and they simultaneously reveal, everyone showing how their party is voting. All the politicians will vote according to how their party votes unless they're manipulated by certain reaction cards. For example, the minor compromise reaction allows a player to choose another party and have all of the politicians in that party who don't disapprove of the issue vote aye, regardless of how the party initially voted. So there are the amendments, then the ballot, the reactions, and then you tally the votes, counting up all the politicians who were in favor and all of the politicians who were against. If a majority are in favor, the law passes and a law is placed on the tracker in Congress. If a majority is against, then it does not pass. In any tie, the speaker decides. Finally, Finally, after there's the full tallying, the public mood is checked. At all times, the public has a mood, an issue that they prefer, that they want parties to pass laws on. If the vote was on any issue that the public does not approve of, the public displeasure track moves forward, inching closer to a backlash that will punish powerful political parties. If the vote was on what the public preferred, then every party who voted aye will be rewarded and given $100,000 for voting in favor of the public's preference. Finally, if the vote was successful, if the law was passed, the player who called the vote will become the speaker and gain the powers of the speaker. One player is always the speaker. At the beginning of the game, the speaker is randomly assigned or given to the player who most recently won the swamp. The speaker begins in the election, buying first, and the speaker also begins in the legislative session, having the right to play the first piece of legislation. The other major power of the speaker is the right to decide in all ties. So for example, if two players say, "I take the floor at the same time," the speaker is the one who determines who gets the floor. Also, if there's a tied vote, the speaker determines whether or not the law is passed. And finally, if at the end of the game, two players win the game simultaneously, it is the speaker who decides who will win. The cycle continues, alternating between elections and legislative sessions, with players playing legislation and negotiating with one another in order to pass laws. The game will end once any party passes 3 laws on each of their issues. However, there is an alternate win condition. There's a card on Congress called the Coalition, which is a special piece of legislation that any player may take and play when they control the floor. If they choose to play the Coalition card, they choose another party, and if that party consents, they enter a coalition together, with the player who played the Coalition card giving up their win condition and only winning the game if the other player, the player that they've chosen, wins the game. The penalty is, of course, that players can no longer have a bill card if they have played the Coalition, and they recall a large number of their politicians, losing a significant portion of their political power until the next election. The Swamp can be played by 3 to 6 players, and it takes 45 to 60 minutes to play. It has simple mechanics that, when layered together, allow a wide set of strategies by individual players, and the unique win conditions of each party that overlap with other parties cause natural alliances that eventually fray and fragment at the end of the game as players make the last push to pass laws for their issues to win. Its political theme and its unique mechanics make it stand out in the market. To be honest, there is no other game like the Swamp that I or my peers have ever played, and yet its mechanics are very simple, allowing it to be accessible by people of all different experiences within board games. I hope that we can talk more about the Swamp. I'm happy to provide you a prototype or answer any questions that you might have about the game. Please don't hesitate to reach out, but most importantly, I want to sincerely thank you for watching this video and giving my board game consideration. Have a good day.